Okay, so we are doing lesson 2-4. We are solving multi-step inequalities. So now we're just kind of combining what we've done the last 2 days. So we're combining the multiplying and dividing and the adding and subtracting. So these first two, A and B, on A, we have y divided by -6 plus 7 is less than 9. So just like when we're solving multi-step equations, you're going to get rid of the one that's being added or subtracted first, then you're going to worry about the multiplying or dividing. So on this, because we're trying to solve for y, so I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. When you do this, cancels, and you have y over -6 still is less than 9 minus 7 is 2. So this is now our equation. So now y divided by -6, you would multiply both sides right here by -6. But don't forget, when you multiply or divide by a negative, it flips your sign around. So instead of less than, it is now greater than. So that cancels, and you have y is now greater than -6 times 2 is -12. And then, of course, we're going to graph it on a number line. So that's going to the right because y is greater than -12. Okay, on B, we have 2v minus 4 is greater than or equal to 8. So we're going to add 4 to both sides to move it. So I have 2v, this canceled, is greater than or equal to 8 plus 4 is 12. Now we've got to divide by 2. If you notice, it's not negative, so we're not flipping our sign around. It stays the same. So 2 divided by 2 cancels, and I'm left with v. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So v is greater than or equal to 6. And so now, when we graph it, it is a filled in circle, but it is still going to the right. Let me see if I can move this so y'all can see the problem. Okay, so I want y'all to do problems 1 and 3. Okay, so you'll pause the video and try those. It does say graph your solution on a number line, and then I'll go over them with you. On problem 1, we have 4b minus 1 is less than 7. So these are two-step equations. So we work backwards. We do the adding or subtracting stuff first, then we do multiplying or dividing. So here's my b, here's my inequality sign. So we've got to get rid of the 4 and the 1. The 4 is being multiplied, the 1 is being subtracted. So we're going to get rid of the 1 first by adding it on both sides, and then I bring everything down. That cancels. I have less than 7 plus 1 is 8. We're still not done because we don't have b by itself. So we have to divide now. It's 4 times b, so I'm going to divide both sides by 4 to get rid of the 4 but keep the b. 8 divided by 4 is 2, so b is less than 2. And then you have to graph your solution. It's an open circle, and b is less than 2, so it goes to the left. Okay, on number 3, n is over here, so I've got to get rid of the 2 and the 11. We're going to get rid of the 11 first. It's being added, so we're going to subtract it from both sides. I still have n over -2. It's greater than 12 minus 11 is 1. Now from here, this is n divided by -2, so I have to multiply both sides by -2. Since it's a negative that we're multiplying or dividing by, we have to flip around our inequality sign. 1 times -2 is -2. So n is less than -2. When you make your number line, remember it gets bigger going this way. So it's an open circle, and n is less than -2. Okay, so example 2, we're going to look at when we have variables on both sides of the inequality sign. So right here we have 6x minus 5 is less than 2x plus 11. So we have two different x's. So before we can solve for x, we have to get these together. They are on opposite sides of the inequality sign, so we have to do the opposite to move them. They moved the other number first, and I don't really like that, but we'll look at what they did. So they added 5 first over. They could have moved the 11. It doesn't matter. Or you could move the 6 or the 2. So they added 5, and they're left with 6x is less than 2x plus 16. So from here, they subtracted 2x over, so they did the opposite. They didn't divide here because they're not trying to get rid of just the 2. That would separate the 2 and the x and leave the x there. They want to move 2 and x. So you look out front. There's nothing, so that means there's that little imaginary plus sign. So you subtract 2x from both sides. 6x minus 2x is 4x. That canceled, and you're left with 16. From here to solve for x, now is where we divide because we want to split them apart and keep the x here, but just get rid of the 4. So we divide both sides by 4, and we get that x is less than 4. Okay, it says here, if you obtain an equivalent inequality that's true, such as -5 is less than 0, the solutions of the inequalities are all real numbers. If you obtain an equivalent inequality that is false, then the inequality has no solution. So what this means, all real numbers, that's kind of like our infinitely many. Let's go ahead for all real numbers. This is the symbol. You draw like 2 lines and make an R out of the first one. All real numbers, that's what that means. That's the symbol. That just means if it is true, but your variables cancel out. We'll look at some of those in just a second with example 3. So if that part confused you on the all real numbers or no solution, just keep watching. So this is where we'll look at what I was telling you about. So this says solve, and they give us 2 problems. So we have 8b minus 3 is greater than 4 times 2b plus 3. Just looking at that, it looks pretty confusing, but take it step by step. We know we're solving for b, and if we go back and look, we have 2 b's, so we're going to have to get those together. Before I can do that, I have some parentheses. There's nothing I can solve in here, so I'm going to have to take this 4 and distribute it. I'm going to have to multiply it into both of those numbers. Okay, so that's what they've done here. 4 times 2b is 8b, plus 4 times 3 is 12. That's where they got this problem. So this is now our problem. 8b minus 3 is greater than 8b plus 12. This problem is exactly why I recommend you always get your variables together first instead of your numbers like they did on the previous problem. Because if we notice, to move 8b, I would subtract it. So we subtract it from both sides. Well, if you notice, it cancels out from both sides, and I'm left with -3 is greater than 12. So if we look, that is not true. -3 is not bigger than 12. So that is where your answer, if I can draw the little O, is no solution. Okay, that's what I was talking about on no solution if it's not true. Okay, so on B, we have 2 times, and in parentheses, 5w minus 1 is less than or equal to 7 plus 10w. So the first thing we have to do is distribute to get rid of those parentheses. 2 times 5w is 10w, minus 2 times 1 is 2, and then we have less than or equal to 7 plus 10w. So get your variables together. So they subtracted 10 from both sides, and what do you know? It cancels again. So we have -2 is less than or equal to 7, and that is true. So the answer is all real numbers. So that's where you do the 2 little lines and make an R without making that noise. So all real numbers. So I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. So what I'm going to have you do is all 4 of these problems at the bottom. Okay, so you can get some good practice on these. Now, if you go back and notice that the examples we just did, these 2 that were special cases had parentheses. That's not always the case. That just happened to work out for this. So don't try to remember that if it has the parentheses where you distribute, it's going to be a special one. That's not always true. But try all 4 of these, and then I'll go over them with you. Okay, on these problems, we're not having to graph our solution. We're just having to solve them. So I have 2 x's, so I first have to get my x's together. If they're on the same side, you just do what's between them, but since they are on opposite sides of the inequality sign, I have to do the opposite. Sorry, I gotta fix this cord. It's tripping me up here. Okay, all good. All right, so I have 5x and 3x, so it doesn't matter which one I move, so I'm going to move the 3x. Now, I don't divide here because I'm not trying to split them apart. I'm trying to move the whole thing, the 3 and the x. So you have to look out front of it. There's like a little imaginary plus sign when there's nothing. So I'm subtracting the 3 and the x to the other side. 5x minus 3x is 2x. I still have minus 12 is less than or equal to -4. Okay, Now it's kind of like the previous problems. I'm trying to solve for x, so I'm going to get rid of this 12 first by doing the opposite and moving it to the other side. Negative 4 plus 12 is 8. Now I divide by 2 because now I want to get rid of just the 2 and keep the 8 there. So we get x is less than or equal to 4. Okay, problem number 6. This one has work before that. We've got to distribute first. So 2 times k is 2k minus 2 times 5 is 10 less than 2k plus 5. Now I have to get my k's together. So I'm going to subtract 2k. 2k minus 2k is 0. I have negative 10 is less than 2k minus 2k is 0, 5. So this is one of those special cases. Is negative 10 less than 5? Yes. So you would just say infinitely many. Okay, let me erase this and we'll look at the next two. Okay, on number 7. So the first thing we have to do on this one is distribute this 4 because we can't solve for what's in parentheses. So I have negative 4 times 3n, which is negative 12n. Negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4, so plus 4. It's greater than negative 12n plus 5.2. Okay, I've got to get my n's together. So I'm going to add 12n to the other side. Negative 12 plus 12 cancels. This says 4 is greater than 5.2. No, that is not true. Okay, number 8, I've got to distribute again. 3 times 2a is 6a, minus 3 times 1 is 3, greater than or equal to 10a minus 11. So we've got to get our a's together. It doesn't matter which one you move. I'm going to move the 6 this time just to make it a little easier on myself. I have negative 3. It's greater than or equal to 10a minus 6a is 4a minus 11. Now we're solving for a. So I'm going to add 11 to the other side. That is positive 8. It's greater than or equal to 4a. I divide by 4. And 2 is greater than or equal to a, which is the same thing as saying a is less than or equal to 2. Either one. Okay, let's look at example 4 now. Okay, next we got our handy dandy word problem. So on this one, says you need a mean score of at least 90 points to advance to the next round of the touchscreen trivia game. What scores in the 5th game will allow you to advance? So first let's go back and talk about some keywords. The mean score. Mean is the average. I always try to remember it as like it's the mean problem because it has all the work. You have to add up all your scores and divide by how many you had. So we want an average of at least 90. So we want our average to equal 90. Or at least, I don't even know why I wrote an 8, of at least 90, which means it could be less than, I just realized something, it could be greater than or equal to. Sorry guys, someone just interrupted my class. That's why I was a little distracted. Okay, so we have to go back. They're talking about these scores here, the trivia challenge. So in game 1, very impressive, they had a score of 95. Game 2 was a score of 91. Game 3 was a score of 77, and Game 4 was a score of 89. So we're trying to figure out what score they would need in the fifth game to have a score of at least 90. So what we do, as I show you right here, you're going to add up the 5 games. So we have 95 plus 91 plus 77 plus 89 plus X, because we don't know what that 5th score is yet. But to find the average, you add them all together and divide by how many you have, which is 5 games. And then we have it greater than or equal to 90. So what we can do is we can add these numbers that we do know. So when we add those, we get 352 plus X divided by 5 is greater than or equal to 90. So now, since all of this on top is being divided by 5, we can get rid of that 5 by multiplying on both sides. Okay, when we do that, it cancels, and I'm left with 352 plus X is greater than or equal to 450. So now to solve for X, I just have to get rid of this number that's by itself, so we subtract 352 from both sides. Now, the reason we had to subtract after multiplying is because it was everything on top being divided by that, and we couldn't subtract until we got rid of that 5. So when we subtracted, we got X is greater than or equal to 98. So that means they had to have a score of 98 or bigger for the average to be at least 90. Okay, that means that whenever you start this problem, this is the one that I want you to do, number 9. I worked this problem out before I worked out the example I just did, and I realized I wrote an equal sign instead of greater than or equal to. So when you see me write an equal sign, that is not. It should be an inequality sign. So this is talking about the same thing. It says you need a mean score of at least 85 points to advance to the next round. What scores in the 5th game will allow you to advance? So again, those scores are 95. Sorry, it's hard to write with my finger. 91, 77, and 89. That's the other 4 scores. So you're trying to figure out what score you need in the 5th game to give you an average of at least 85 points. So work that one out, and then I'll work it out for you. Okay, so the word problem, it says you need a mean score of at least 85 points to advance to the next round. What scores in the 5th game will you need or will allow you to advance? So here's the table of the first 4 games, and we don't know the 5th. We want to know for when our mean is 85. First of all, mean, just like the problem we just did together, is the average. So you're going to have to add everything up and divide it by how many you have. So we know we're going to have to add these 5 numbers together. But we don't know what X is. But we know it's all of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Divided by 5. And we want it to be at least 85 points. So we set it equal to 85 because that's what we want the average to be. So we go back and we can add these numbers. Just realized I forgot my calculator. So 95 plus 91 plus 77 plus 89. So should have known that from the previous problem. 352 plus X over 5 equals 85. So now it's just like the one we just did. I guess I'll keep that on. We're going to get rid of this 5 first because it's all of this divided by 5. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. It'll cancel it there. So I have 352 plus X equals 425. Now we subtract because there's nothing out front, so it means that's positive. And I get that X equals 73. So you need a score of at least 73 to advance to the next round. Hopefully, bend down so I can see it a little better. You need a score of 73.